Hello everyone, welcome to the next installment of our awareness videos. Today we have optometrist Prema Chande. Ma'am is a renowned optometrist in India and currently she is heading Lotus College of Optometry. She has over two decades of experience in practicing optometry and her interest areas are public health and she also practices low vision. Welcome ma'am.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for the introduction.
So today we are going to talk about low vision and how it affects what is exactly low vision. And I have few questions which patients I have picked up from patients. So that will be a later part of the interview. To start with, what is low vision?
So low vision is basically when we talk, all of us in the general public understand what is vision and what is blindness, right? So this is an area which is in between vision and blindness. We call it partial sight or low vision. So here the patient can see, they are not totally blind. Like for the blind people, the difference between having the room light on or off is the same. So that's a totally blind person. But for a person with partial sight, they have some vision, but the vision is not adequate for them to function normally, to carry on with their daily activities and so on. It's like moving from one place to another, trying to read and write, moving around independently, trying to do activities of like personal grooming or driving or commuting in public transport. So they do have some vision, but it's not adequate to do some of their activities without any form of a correction or a device. So that's what we call as low vision.
Okay. As you've very well defined that it's somewhere between. So there must be some devices through which you help these patients to correct their vision or something. So what are these devices called and how do they act basically?
Right. So basically what we do is they have very little vision. We try to enhance it with the help of devices or magnifiers. Here, these magnifiers will enlarge the view for the patient to such a way that they will be able to proceed with their day-to-day activities. We call these as low vision devices, vision enhancement devices. They could be also assistive devices, which could be like a cane to help them to move around and so on. So it's a whole battery of optical and non-optical devices which we use, and all this falls under what we call as low vision aids.
Okay. And you have been practicing low vision, so I want you to tell the general public that what is the role of an optometrist in practicing low vision and how a low vision person can be directed to a specialist, an optometrist.
So basically, optometrists are the people who are specialized in delivering these low vision care services. Their role begins where the ophthalmologist predominantly tells them that there can be no form of treatment in the form of medication or surgery to get their vision better. That's the vision they have to live with. So that's where the role of an optometrist begins. Here, the optometrist will try to see with their existing vision how we can enhance it so that they would have equal opportunities in terms of education, employment, and so on. So that is the basic role of an optometrist, where we will actually try to improve the quality of life for a person with low vision and to see what best we can do with their existing vision.
All right. Ma'am, now I will be asking you a few questions which, from patient's perspective, I have picked them up. So I'll read out the question. Eye specialists have told me that my eyes are damaged due to age and diabetes. Can these low vision aids help me? Eye specialists have told me that my child is born with albinism, cataract, cone dystrophy, these diseases, and that has damaged the nerves. Can my child study in a normal school or do I need to admit him in a blind school? So there are two questions in one. Yes. So if you can answer the one with age and diabetes and then the next one.
Right. So that's very typical. We would see elderly patients who've been told by ophthalmologist or they are surgeons, because they have already done their best in the form of surgery, in terms of treating the diabetes or so on. But sometimes the damage is permanent, especially with diabetes. And of course, age-related changes truly have no cure. So there is damage which is already done, and there's no form of medical treatment available for. So whatever form the surgeons usually use in the form of injections, laser, but even the treatment given is often to prevent further damage and not to improve the damage which is already occurred. It cannot reverse the damage, right? But what happens is when patients have those kind of problems, typically like this patient who has asked this question, could be an elderly person whose primary need is to read books, to read their religious books, to make phone calls to their family members, to read medicine labels, right? And if they have age-related changes in the eye, or the eye is damaged due to diabetes, then this particular ability of theirs to do near work is hampered. It's a disability where they are not able to, and they have this handicap of either being dependent on somebody or they are not able to proceed with their work. So when such a situation is there, low vision devices can be very, very helpful. We have a whole range of magnifiers, from spectacle magnifiers to handheld magnifiers to illuminated magnifiers and so on. With these devices, what we can do is we can help them to do whatever activity. In most cases, we are able to help. In some cases, of course, we cannot help. But in most cases, we are able to help them to at least do some part of reading, like newspapers, their religious books, their medicine labels. So low vision devices can certainly help people who have their eyes damaged with either with age-related changes or diabetes, which is among the most common causes where they have difficulty with proceeding with their near work.
Okay, so they are not totally dependent on somebody else. They can at least do their.
That's right. And with the second question which you asked, can you just
Yes,
read?
I will repeat.
Please,
My
yes.
specialists have told that my child is born with albinism or cataract or cone dystrophy that has damaged the nerves. Can my child study in normal school, or do I need to admit him in blind school? So first you tell me what usually happens with these set of diseases. What is the disability?
Right.
The nerve is damaged, so what will be the disability? And then the school question.
Sure. So these are different diseases actually. So if it's albinism, these are children who have really clear skins, white, deep. They have this. They are devoid of pigmentation, so they are more fairer in skin tone. Their eyes are lighter, sometimes almost pink eyes they have, and this is sometimes a genetic problem, and these are children born with the disorder, and there's truly no cure for it. But of course, these children can study in normal schools. They have very high refractive errors. They may need glasses, very high prescription glasses. And because their biggest disability is tolerance to light, because there's no pigment that can absorb the light. Their sensitivity to light is very strong, which means the child, if in a dimly lit room, can actually move around very comfortably, right? But you put the child on the street, and the moment they see sunlight, they just close their eyes, because the sensitivity to light, or the photophobia, as we call phobia to light, is so strong that the child just closes the eye, and then obviously there is no vision for the child to even move. So low vision devices can help these children with different kinds of filters, just some modification in the rooms, with correct prescription glasses, with devices to see the blackboard and so on. Definitely children with albinism who are partially sighted can stay in schools, in regular schools. They do not need to go to blind schools, right? So that's with children with albinism. So if there's a child with cataract, and if they are born with cataract, of course, earlier they get operated. That should be the first treatment modality. For some reason, if there is a late surgery, and if the eye or the retina is not well developed because of that, it could be an amblyopic eye, because no light has passed through the cataract for years, then these children would be partially sighted post-surgery. And they can also be helped similarly with spectacles and with telescopes for viewing the board and so on. So irrespective of what the congenital disorder is, if the child, whether it's Stargardt's, where the center or the macula of the eye is damaged in children by birth, or it's albinism, or any other form of disorder in which they are born with, if the child is partially sighted, not blind, if they are blind, of course, Braille is an option. They still can study, right? So we have to ensure that the children study, whether it's in the form of Braille or any other form. And if they are having partial sight or children with low vision, yes, the condition cannot be cured because they are born with it, but definitely the child can remain in sighted schools, in regular schools, with the help of telescopes and devices, sitting closer. They can see the board. They will be provided with, these devices in school. These devices are available with NGOs who can provide it free of cost to them. And the schools have been under the Right to Education Act. That's a very, very powerful act we have, which says every child with any form of disability, if they can do sighted education, physical or visual disability, hearing disability, any disability, I would like every parent to understand that Right to Education is a very powerful act which we have, where even if the school does not want the child because of the disability, if the child can demonstrate that they can stay in school and study, the parents have the right to argue with the school legally and keep the child in, right? And the child should be provided every form of special education to be remaining in a regular school, because that's what is going to give the child opportunities in future. It does not matter if instead of being in 10th standard, the child with the same age would be studying in 8th standard. It really does not matter. 1 or 2 years in the chronological age, if they are lagging behind, truly does not matter. But staying in sighted education is more important than going to inclusive education programs.
Okay. So going to the next question. My child has low vision and is in 9th standard this year and manages to study with magnifier and telescope. But next year he has to take board examinations. What can I do so that my child can be permitted to appear for examinations?
So schools, by and large, today with Right to Education have been trained so that they would assist a special child, and they need to get permission. So if the child can write, it depends on how much impairment they have. If they fall under moderate category. In the moderate category, often the child is able to write his or her own paper. Then all they need to get permission from the board is for an extra half an hour. Extra time, so half an hour or 1 hour, the board will assess and they will provide that extra time for the child to write the paper because they would be slower, right? So that's one. The child can also get permission to write large font using felt pen, not a regular pencil or pen, so that they are able to see what they are writing. So that also could be a permission given to them. For some reason, if the child is severely visually impaired, okay, so they may be able to see the board using, but when it comes to writing skill, they may not have it. So in such situations, the child can ask for a writer. So that's also written permission. In some schools, the schools facilitate this, and in some schools, you need to approach the local board, your SSC board, where they will give you a certificate which says you are provided with a scribe. And often NGOs, the local NGOs will have a list of scribes with them, because there are rules for the scribe, which means if the child is in 10th standard, the scribe should be 9th or below age. The scribe cannot be of 11th standard, right? It cannot be older because they may influence what they write. So the IQ of the child has to be either same or lower. It cannot be higher. So those are the rules they have. So often you won't get another child with 10th grade because they would also be sitting for the exams, right? So a lower grade is what you will get. And with the help of the scribe, the student can verbally give the answers and the scribe would write on behalf of them. And the child would definitely be able to take the board exams.
All right, all right. This is great information. Okay. So the last question I have picked up is, when my child grows up, what career opportunities does he or she have if his or her eye problem cannot be treated?
So basically, we have a lot of rehab specialists who would guide better, counselors and rehab specialists who guide better. So what optometry practitioners should do is, by and large, have a referral network where they can send their patients to, these places so that they can actually go and get professional counseling. But as an optometrist, definitely we can motivate our patients, saying that it doesn't mean that if you're partially sighted, you don't have career options, right? There may be restrictions. You can't fly a plane, right? So there are restrictions there are some jobs which you cannot do, but there are many jobs which you can train for. Some of our lawyers in the country, the best lawyers in this country, are visually impaired, totally blind people, but they are brilliant lawyers, right? So the child can choose an education which is either from teaching to legal advice. Banks have a lot of reservations. State Bank of India, Standard Chartered Bank. These are some banks which I'm positively certain that they do have certain reserved seats for the visually disabled, physically disabled. So some of the corporates, as a part of CSR, keep some employment quota for people who have disabilities, right? So visual disability is among it. So banks can employ them. So they can definitely be bankers, they can definitely be lawyers, they can be teachers. So there are some professions which they can definitely take up, even though they are partially sighted. What they cannot be, in fact, there's at least one case where I can say, because medical education typically asks for good vision, good physical ability, and so on. But there's one legal case where in Mumbai there was a totally blind girl who fought this case, and she got an admission into a physiotherapy program, because she says everything in physiotherapy is about touch. And she says, if I'm capable of learning all the medical, going through the 4 years of medical education, 5 years of medical education with the help of a scribe, I can certainly practice physiotherapy. And she's among our most brilliant physiotherapists. So this has been a particular case where she actually had to go into a court ruling and do it. But for sure, I can, count many people in the banking, legal, education sectors who are partially sighted but who are doing a brilliant job with what they do.
Okay. Great. So just to wrap up, what I feel is, as optometrists, we are not only doing clinical work, but a lot of rehabilitation, counseling. All these are very important things which we should, try and do in our practice so that we can help these people. And I'm sure that this interview is not only going to help public, but there's a lot of information for us as well, that as optometrists, these things also are very, very important so that we can guide patients and their parents or guardians. So very well, very well done, actually, both of us. So thank you very much for your time, ma'am, and we will be seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.